Hello everyone, welcome to this video. Here we are going to learn about the new viewChild API that was currently released. Now this viewChild API banks on the Angular signal feature to be able to get element references from the DOM. But before we learn about the viewChild API, let's first look at this traditional method of grabbing element references from the DOM. Here we are using the viewChild the corrector, and we are passing the template variable name, which is the child, and it will grab the HTML instance from of this and then assign it to this child class field. Then this works because in the ng after view init we will see the log of the element ref, and also we can change the styling of the element by doing this, or the content. Here we are changing the text content to viewChild updated. Now let's convert this viewChild decorator to use the new viewChild API. Now to do that, first we'll remove this at viewChild decorator. We'll remove this. Then we'll now assign this to the viewChild API and then pass in the selector child. Now this child becomes a signal with an element instance of this h1. So you can see now we are having an error here because native element does not exist on type. So this is now a signal, and we can see that the viewChild API is from the Angular/core module. So it returns a signal, and to access the element grabbed off from this, we'll have to call it as a function like this. Well, first let's call it as a function inside this child, and there we see the result. So you see we have the same result as we did when we used the traditional at viewChild decorrect, but this viewChild new API now replaced the at viewChild decorrector. But this returns a signal, so this child becomes a data function, and to retrieve the instance of the h1 inside it, we have to call it like a function, and we can see we have the native element. Now let's go further to change the text content like we did before with the viewChild decorrector. Okay, this we have an error here, object of type unknown. So to type this, we'll come here and put element ref. So what we do is we'll assign this to a child then use the if condition to make a check before the styling. So we call it child l, this dot child, then we'll make a check in the child l, then we'll now say child l dot native elements dot style dot color red. So it's red, but let's change the view. So you see it works now with the view child. Now we can also use the read property here. Remember in the last video we saw how we can use read to tell the at view child decorrector what provider token to resolve from the result. So to do that, we'll have to pass another parameter, and then we'll pass the read property and then the value. So we are resolving an element ref. So we're having an error here. So let me clear this. So we're now reading off an element ref from this h1. So this child will become an element ref, which is what we are doing. Then let's read off a view container ref from it. So you see, once we make it a view container ref, then the value of this signal will become a view container ref, and that's why we have now an error here because native element does not exist on a view container ref. So we'll have to remove this. Sorry. So you see now the instance of the value of the signal here is now a view container ref. So you see, whatever we can do with the add view child decorator, we can do the same with this new viewChild API. Now let me recap. This viewChild API returns a signal Now the signal returns the value of the query element that is read off from the DOM. So what this does is to query in the DOM a selector that had the template variable child, and then create a signal and assign the value of the signal to the element instance. And it will, in this case, we are passing a read property here. So it will grab a view container ref off from this and assign it to the value of this signal, which will get by calling this signal as a function. Because you remember in our past videos on Angular signals, to get the value of a signal, we have to call it as a function because the signal is a getter function. Now, in the add view child decorator, in our past video, remember we have this static property that controls when the queries are resolved. Like for example, if the static method is true, that means the query are resolved on the initialization of the component. But if it false, the queries are resolved on each change detection run. So that means when the static is true, we can get the value of the queries in our ng on init. It will not be undefined, and also in the ng after view init. But if the static property is false, we cannot get the query results in the ng on init. We will only get it in the ng after init. But this is not the case when using this viewChild API. It resolves the queries when the component is initialized and also on each change detection run in the component. So in this case, we can get the value of the query results of this child both in the ng after view init and also in the ng on init. So you see, we can get it there, and we can also do whatever we want with the query. So it will not throw undefined. And when this component is rendered, the viewChild API will also update the value of the signal value reference. So now let's look at multiple instances. If we have multiple instances here, for example, let me copy this, create another child here. Let me have this one. Now let me have these two. Now let me remove this console, but log in the ng on it. Let's use only the ng after view init so as to avoid confusion. So you see we have multiple instances here of h1 with the same template variable names, child here and child here. So as we have in the add view child decorator, the view child here also will grab only the first occurrence of the selector passed to it and assign it to the value of the signal in this class field. So here we'll have this view child a1 grabbed and stored in the value of this view child. So this will log the element ref of this. So to prove it, let's do the same as we did before. Child, grab it, then check for it, and then console log, sorry, child l, console log the text content. No, sorry, native. I think we'll have native element. We'll have native element here. Unknown. Sorry. Come here. We'll add element ref. So you see we have the log. Let me remove this log also so that it doesn't. So you see we have the view child one text. So we can see that this view child only grabbed the first occurrence of the template variable child and stored it in the value of this signal child. So you can see it here. So in the case of multiple instances, it will do the same as the view child decorator does. It will just grab the first occurrence of the template variable and then store it in the value of the signal. Now let's look at how we can use component instances with the viewChild API. Here we have the test component. Now let's grab this, and then instead of the viewChild, let's render the test component. Then we'll pass the template variable. Now we can grab the instance of this component using this viewChild API. So all what we are going to do is to pass the template variable name as a selector to this, then tell it this is a test component. Then here we'll assign it test, and then we will now log it. First, let me comment out this and then change this to test. So what the viewChild does is that it will grab the occurrence of this test variable from the DOM and then assign it to the value of this signal test. Now the value will be the instance of test component. So it's what we'll have here. Now let's try it and see. So you can see it's an instance of the test component with the counter and everything and the methods all there. So you can see we can also use the template variable and also use the viewChild to grab off component instances. Now if we have multiple components like this, we will simply grab the first one and that's it. To simply grab the first one and discard the rest. It will not grab the rest, so it will just grab only the first one and return it. So we will have the same thing. It will grab the first one and return it. Now also let's look at how we can grab component off from the DOM without using the template variable name. So as we can do with the viewChild decorator, so we can do with this viewChild API. Instead of passing the test, we can pass the test component here. So what this does is it will query for the occurrences of this test component child instance in the DOM and then grab the element that corresponds to it. So you see it still works. And then we can call the methods in this test component and they will work as usual. Okay, now let's add two buttons here to decrement and increment our counter. Let's add button here, increment. Now let's add decrement. This is for test and you see they will work. Now we'll add our click method. Let's say increase, and also here add the click, and we'll say decrease. So we'll come to our component and add the methods increase. Oh, sorry, not injector. What happened? Increase, then decrease. Then here we'll call the signal test, grab the instance, and then call the increment. So also we'll do here this does test, a function call, then call the decrement. So you see this test is a signal that contains a value, and the value is the instance of the test component, which is this. So when we click on this increment and on the decrement, we will grab the value in the test signal, which is an instance of the test component, and call the methods inside it. So it will call this and this. So you see that this our counter will work. When we click on this increment and we'll click on the decrement, it works. So you see the viewChild API is very powerful and also does everything that the viewChild decorator does, and it also makes our code cleaner because we will not be seeing the symbol, which can be very confusing for beginners in the Angular framework. Yes, so this is a very neat way of querying element references from the DOM in Angola. Now, there might be a scenario in which the selector we are trying to query in the DOM via the viewChild may not match any element in the DOM, and it will result to the value of the signal being undefined. Now, this viewChild has a property which is required that we can use to make sure that the queries we are using in the viewChild will always match with an element in the DOM. Now, let's take for example, let's assign a template variable named test to this compo. Then we'll remove this, and instead of writing test, we wrote only test. Now you see that there is no element with a template variable test in the DOM. So this will result to the signal value of this test to being undefined. Now let's see it. You see the value is undefined. Now this required property makes sure that whatever we are trying to query using the selector will always match to an element in the DOM. If not, there will be an error in our console. So to make sure that the query we are being querying to the DOM using this viewChild will always match to a value, we'll have to use the required. So to do that, we'll add dot required. So this viewChild exports a required method or a function, and then inside it will now pass the selector. So if we save this, we will see an error in our DOM telling us there is no element in the DOM with a template variable name of test. Okay, sorry, we will have to type it, telling you that testo component. So you see in our DOM, it throws an error, ng095 child query result is required, but no value is available. So you see there is no element in the DOM that has a template variable name of test. So this tells us that we should be very careful. So seeing this, we have to verify the selector that we imputed here. So we'll have now, okay, this is test, that we are missing a T here. So we just come here and add our T, and there will be no error in our DOM. And also, even with the error, we cannot even run our component, because it will continuously throw error for us, because the value of the signal is undefined. So with the right template variable name, it will work. It also works with other selectors, like passing the directive reference, component reference, or the other provider token. Like for example, let's say we have another component. Let's say let's just create another component just for test purposes, and then call it, let's export it, then call it test1, test1, then come here and write test1, test1 standalone. So we'll copy it, come here, add it to the import array. Then instead of using test, come here and write test1. So what we are doing is that we are trying to query a test1 component instance from the DOM, but there is no test1 component or any selector of test1 in the template here in our viewChild component. So we are having an error. Okay, yes, because this won't work. This won't work. There's no increment and decrement in the test1. So because there is no test1 component at all in our template, this required will throw an error instead of making the value of the signal undefined. Let's go. So you see it throws an error. Child query result is required, but no value is available. So you see this is because we have no test1 component in our template. But if we render the test one component in our template like this, then the error will be gone because we can find an instance of it. So this is how the viewChild API works. So to recap on what we did in this video, the viewChild, similar to the viewChild decorator, queries for element references in the DOM and assigns it to a class field. So, but with the viewChild, we don't have a need of using the viewChild decorator. We just simply call the viewChild like this, and we can grab element references off from the DOM. So we can grab element references via the template variable names or from the component on the directive or the provider token instances. Now the viewChild API resolves the query results right from when the component is initialized and also when change detection run is made on the component. So it merged the static property true and false into one and using it as the default value. Then and also we can use the read property in the viewChild API, which makes it possible to read off any instance from the query results. We can read off a component, directive, template ref, element ref, or view container ref, whatever we want. And also it introduced the new required method, which makes sure that the references we are trying to grab of the template should exist on the DOM. So this is the end of this video. I hope you understood whatever we did here and also love this video. Thank you for sticking with us to the end of this video. In the next video, we are going to look at the viewChildren API, which is similar to the viewChildren decorator. So we are going to look at it to know how it works and also see the resemblance it has with the traditional viewChildren decorator. Thanks so much. Please like and share this video, and also don't forget to subscribe and also click on the notification button to get notified on new videos I release. Thank you so much and see you on the next video. Bye.